They called law enforcement on me for docking my own boat on my own lake, sitting on my own land. But what they didn't realize was that I had just sold my tech startup for $47 million, and I was about to turn their petty little power flex into the most expensive miscalculation of their lives. I was standing on my pier at 7 a.m., steaming mug in hand, watching my 24-foot fishing boat hover in the early morning haze. The peaceful quiet snapped in half when I heard the crunch of boots grinding into gravel. 3 county deputies were making their way toward me, and across the water I spotted Nora Halstead, the president of the Ridgewater HOA, pointing in my direction like she was commanding a tactical operation. The soft whine of my boat's engine was still cooling from my sunrise fishing session when the lead deputy stepped forward. "Sir, we got a report of unlawful boat usage. I nearly spit my coffee across the lake." "Illegal? On my personal lake? On my personal land?" And the part that really gets me, you tell me in the comments what you would do if an HOA tried to regulate water they didn't even own. Stick around too, because by the end of this story, I didn't just win. I ended up controlling everything they believed belonged to them. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let me back up and explain how this all started. My name is Alex Mercer, and 6 months ago, I was living the Silicon Valley reality. Call it a dream or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. After a decade and a half of grinding through tech companies, I finally hit pay dirt when Microsoft acquired my cybersecurity firm. $47 million later, I was finally free to chase the one thing I'd always wanted: vanish into the Texas countryside and fish whenever the hell I felt like it. I found this flawless 50-acre property outside Austin, complete with an 8-acre private lake that shimmered like polished glass at sunrise. The main home sat roughly 200 yards back from the water, hugged by massive oak trees that had been there long before Texas ever became a state. The former owner, an older rancher named Harold Benton, gave me just one warning as he passed me the keys. "Watch out for those nosy folks in the subdivision. They think they run the whole county." I should have listened. The day I put my boat in the water for the very first time, I felt like I had finally made it home. The mix of diesel exhaust, pine trees, and lake water blended into this addictive smell of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. I had been out maybe 20 minutes, just learning the lake's shape and depth, when I noticed someone marching toward my fence line with a clipboard and a measuring tape. Nora Halstead was 58 and looked like she had come into the world already holding a binder of regulations, president of the Ridgewater HOA for the last 3 years. She carried that particular strain of suburban authority that comes from having too much free time and not nearly enough real influence. Her perfectly styled silver hair didn't shift even slightly in the breeze, and her mouth was set in a permanent line of disapproval. She called out across the water in a voice that carried like a foghorn, insisting that my boat was an eyesore visible from their neighborhood and violated their aesthetic standards. I killed the engine and drifted closer to the shore, telling her I was confused because this was my private lake on my private land. Nora's face turned bright red. She declared that the HOA rules clearly stated any structure or vehicle that created visual pollution affecting nearby property values was subject to their control, and that my boat, which she pointed at like it was some kind of warship, was dragging down their home prices. I felt that metallic surge of frustration wash over my tongue. This was exactly the petty kind of nonsense I had moved out here to avoid. I told her I had no idea what HOA she was referring to, but whatever it was, it had zero power over what happened on my property. The rough cedar boards of the dock creaked beneath my boots as I stepped out of the boat. Nora was scribbling furiously on her clipboard, the scratching of her pen sounding like nails on a chalkboard. She snapped that we would see about that she was filing a formal complaint with county code enforcement, and that my boat would be gone by the end of the week, or I would be hearing from their lawyers. She clicked away across the pavement in her heels, stormed back to her white Mercedes SUV, and I just stood there wondering what kind of fresh nightmare I had walked into. That night, I did what any decent tech guy does when confronted with a problem. I dug into property records, HOA agreements, zoning rules. I dove headfirst into the maze of rural Texas regulations. That was when I stumbled onto something very interesting about water rights that Nora Halstead was going to wish she had never given me a reason to research. Nora wasted no time following through on her threat. Within 48 hours, she had filed a formal complaint with the county, claiming I was running a commercial boating business on residential land. In her twisted reasoning, one guy with a fishing boat equaled a full-scale marina, and she did not stop there. That would have been too simple. She rounded up 12 HOA members to sign a petition demanding I remove my boat for the safety and aesthetic integrity of our community. We are talking about a scuffed-up base boat here, not a cruise ship. Then she made the rounds at the local grocery store, spreading rumors about the rude outsider who thought money meant he could destroy their peaceful lake. The cherry on top was when she posted pictures of my boat on Nextdoor with a caption calling it a new neighbor's industrial eyesore, wrecking their million-dollar views and asking what they could do to stop me. The comments erupted like a trash fire, split between people calling me everything from an entitled tech bro to some kind of environmental menace, and others telling Nora to mind her own business. It was like watching an online mob form in real time. 3 days later, I got a visit from the county inspector assigned to my case, a guy named Carlos Vega. Carlos was a straight shooter in his mid-30s who looked like he would rather do almost anything else than deal with HOA drama. He glanced around my place with a puzzled expression and admitted he had to ask exactly where this commercial operation was that Miss Halstead had complained about. I pointed at my boat and told him that was it. One boat, one owner, 0 customers. Carlos shook his head and dropped his voice, telling me that between us she had filed 47 complaints in the last 3 years. 47. She was driving everyone at the county office up the wall, but she knew just enough legal language to make their lives miserable. Her method was simple: file complaints until people got tired and gave in instead of pushing back. That was when the light bulb flipped on in my head. This was never really about my boat. This was Nora's game plan in action: harass, intimidate, and wear people down until they surrendered. Only this time she had chosen the wrong person. After Carlos left, I spent the evening in the county courthouse basement, surrounded by the musty smell of old files and decades of bureaucratic dust. My fingers moved across rough photocopied pages that held secrets Nora had never bothered to uncover. And then I hit the jackpot. It turned out the Ridgewater Estates subdivision had been advertised with promises of exclusive lake access for all its residents. Shiny brochures showed families swimming, boating, and fishing in crystal clear water. There was just one tiny, devastating issue. The lake access had never actually been granted in any legal sense. The developer had made verbal assurances, but never secured the true water rights. For 5 years, Nora's beloved HOA members had been using my boat ramp illegally, launching their kayaks and pontoon boats from my land without permission. I sat in my truck that night, drumming my fingers on the steering wheel as the weight of what I had discovered sank in. Here is a knowledge nugget that can save you a lot of money. Always demand a full survey when buying waterfront property, because water rights are separate from land rights, and former owners can hold on to access rights you don't even know exist. Water rights can be more valuable than the dirt itself, and those rights can override any HOA document or neighborhood arrangement. I drove home with a plan forming in my mind. Nora wanted to play legal hardball. Fine, game on. But first, I needed proof of exactly how many of her precious HOA residents were trespassing on my land. That evening, I sat on my porch with a beer and watched 3 different Ridgewater Estates homeowners use my ramp to launch their boats like they owned the place. At the same time, Nora was posting on Facebook about taking back our lake from entitled outsiders. If only she knew how entitled she was about to feel. Her next move showed she was either totally detached from reality or truly believed she could gaslight an entire county. She formed something called the Lake Renewal Committee, claiming my boat was disrupting local wildlife. She actually reached out to the local newspaper in Austin with environmental concerns about motorboat pollution damaging a delicate ecosystem. The paper was not interested, but Nora refused to stop. She filed a noise complaint saying my 6 a.m. fishing runs violated quiet hours, insisting that starting my boat's engine before sunrise was destroying the peace of her gated neighborhood. This, by the way, is a neighborhood next to a working cattle ranch where roosters start crowing at 4:30 in the morning. Then she tried to get clever. She pushed the city council to rezone my property as a conservation area, which would have banned motorized vehicles on the water. When I heard about that stunt, I almost spat out my morning coffee. The audacity was unreal. Her harassment campaign was only intensifying. HOA loyalists started taking photos of me every single time I used my boat, using telephoto lenses like they were paparazzi, and I was some kind of criminal celebrity. Someone, and I have a pretty good idea who, put up no motorboat signs along my shoreline. On my land. The nerve of these people. Nora's husband Grant added the creepiest twist by lurking near our property line with binoculars like some suburban spy. He would stand there for hours watching me through the lenses with the focus of a hawk tracking a mouse. The cold morning mist rising off the lake during my 6 a.m. fishing outings was regularly interrupted by the mechanical click of camera shutters echoing over the water. The last straw came when someone filed an anonymous complaint accusing me of running an illegal fishing guide business. Because apparently one person out there fishing alone somehow meant a commercial operation in Nora's world. It was time to lawyer up. I hired a property lawyer named Naomi Park who specialized in water rights and billed me $3,000 an hour, worth every cent. Naomi was sharp as a blade and had absolutely no tolerance for HOA nonsense. Within a week, she had unearthed information that left me stunned. My original 1960s ranch deed included exclusive rights to the entire lake, not just the portion touching my property line, the entire body of water. The Ridgewater Estates developer had never owned the water rights and therefore had never had the authority to sell access to anyone. It got even better. Old records showed that the lake had been artificially expanded in the 1970s using money from the ranch's previous owner. In other words, the HOA was claiming rights to improvements they had never funded. And here is where it got really interesting. Naomi discovered that Nora's HOA had been charging residents a $2,000 yearly lake access fee for 5 years. Do the math. That is $47,000 taken in for access they had never had the legal authority to offer. Naomi told me that if people paid for a service the HOA had no legal right to provide, we might be looking at fraud. Here is your second knowledge nugget. HOAs cannot control private land outside their boundaries without specific easement agreements, and taking money for amenities they don't own is potentially wire fraud, which is a federal offense. While Naomi was assembling our legal case, I was running my own surveillance operation. I installed security cameras around the dock and began logging every illegal use of my boat ramp. The spreadsheet grew longer day by day. HOA members launching kayaks, kids jumping off my dock to swim, adults casting lines from my shoreline. The bitter taste of coffee became a regular companion during those before-dawn stakeouts, as I watched Nora's husband trespassing on my land while watching me. Every morning, I would go over the footage and add another entry to my evidence folder. The beautiful thing was that Nora had no clue that she was building my case for me, one act of trespassing at a time. But Nora wasn't slowing down. If anything, she was ramping up, proving that desperate people don't simply double down. They go full nuclear. She contacted Texas Parks and Wildlife, claiming I needed a commercial fishing license because, according to her, nobody fishes that often unless they're getting paid for it. The state investigator who called me actually chuckled when I explained the truth. Then she organized a so-called community safety forum about my dangerous boating activity. The flyer she circulated featured a dramatic photo of my boat with the words, "Is your family at risk?" printed like an alarm bell, as if I were hunting sea monsters instead of casually catching bass. Her next-door posts were growing increasingly unhinged. She insisted my boat caused waves that damaged the shoreline and threatened to sue me for tanking property values through visual pollution. The comment threads had become a battleground, split between her few remaining loyalists and people who were clearly tired of her nonsense. But Nora's crowning act of stupidity arrived on a Tuesday morning. She dialed 911 and claimed my boat had nearly run over children swimming near the shore. The problem? There were 0 children in the water. My security cameras made that painfully obvious. The lake was completely empty, except for me quietly fishing nearly 200 yards from shore. Deputy Elena Ruiz arrived about 20 minutes later, looking like she would prefer wrestling a wild hog to dealing with neighborhood theatrics. She informed me they'd received a report of reckless boating threatening kids. I pointed her to the live security feed showing an entirely empty lake. She watched the footage, then glanced across the water where Nora was standing on her deck, still clutching her phone. The deputy's face shifted from concern to thinly veiled irritation. She told me this appeared to be a false report and reminded me those were taken very seriously. Then she headed over to Nora's property for a conversation I couldn't hear, but thoroughly enjoyed watching unfold. Lots of animated gestures from the deputy, lots of head jerking from Nora. Later that afternoon, Deputy Ruiz stopped by my house to tell me she had warned Nora about filing false reports. In Texas, it's a Class B misdemeanor, and repeat offenses could land her in jail. My evidence-gathering mission was paying off. The security footage showed 23 separate incidents of trespassing by HOA members in just 2 weeks. Nora had even been giving lake tours to potential homebuyers, showing off water access her neighborhood didn't legally have. I even caught her husband Grant dumping lawn fertilizer near the shoreline, an outright environmental violation. But the real jaw-dropper came later when Naomi dug up that the original Ridgewater Estates developer still owed $340,000 in unpaid property taxes. The guy had gone bankrupt and vanished, leaving behind legal messes no one bothered to investigate. Meanwhile, the community pressure around me was growing. Other ranchers began calling to share their own HOA war stories. Jim Porter, who owned the ranch 2 miles north, told me Nora's group had once tried to force him to repaint his barn because it was visible from the subdivision. Eddie Morales, who ran the local bait shop, mentioned Nora's people had tried to pressure him into refusing me service. He told them, "This is America. Anyone who pays gets bait." But now they were trying to organize some sort of boycott. Even County Commissioner Ray Fowler quietly suggested I might have grounds to pursue harassment charges after Nora filed her 4th false police report. The next-door comment sections had turned into full-on digital chaos, half cheering Nora, half telling her she'd lost her grip on reality. One comment stuck with me. "Nora, you've absolutely lost your mind. It's his boat on his lake. Get a hobby." But I had started seeing the larger picture. This was not about noise, aesthetics, or property values. This was a land grab. My research revealed that Grant, Nora's husband, worked for a development company called Horizon Crest, the same company that had been quietly buying up rural properties around the lake for the past 2 years. They wanted me out so they could pick up my ranch for cheap and turn it into another subdivision. The boat drama was just the opening act of a much bigger plan. As I sat on my dock that evening, the faint scent of Nora's perfume still lingering from our latest confrontation, I sensed her next move would be even more desperate. People with hidden agendas rarely back off. That's when I noticed something odd happening at the old Marina 2 miles downstream. Boats coming and going, workers with clipboards and measuring gear. Something significant was happening there, and I had a feeling whatever it was would shift everything. My curiosity finally got the best of me, so I drove down to check out the activity at Lakeshore Marina. What I found was a family business on the edge of collapse, and the missing key to everything. Frank Kowalski was 67 and looked like he had been carved out of the same weathered oak timbers surrounding the marina. He had built that place from the ground up back in 1978, when the lake was nothing more than a quiet fishing spot and Austin was still a sleepy college town. Now he was facing foreclosure after his wife's cancer treatments wiped out their entire savings. "Lost Maria last year," he said, his voice thick with decades of memories. "Medical bills drained everything we worked for. The bank wants their money by the end of the month or they're taking the property." As we talked, Frank mentioned something that made my stomach drop. "Funny thing is, your HOA folks have been using my boat launch for years. Never paid a cent, but they act like they own it." Then Frank dropped the bombshell that changed everything. He explained that my ranch's lake fed directly into his marina through underground springs and surface runoff. Whoever controlled that upper water source essentially controlled his entire operation. I asked what he meant by control, and he pulled out a faded water rights document from 1960. According to it, my land held senior water rights to the entire 12-mile creek system. Legally, I could restrict water flow and shut down every dock, boat slip, and water-dependent structure downstream if I wanted to. The reality hit at me like a lightning strike. My ranch didn't just control my own lake. I controlled the entire watershed feeding the marina. And here's the twist. The marina property included the very boat launch Nora's HOA had been sneaking onto for 5 straight years. If I bought the marina, I could legally block every single one of them from the water altogether. But at this point, it wasn't just about revenge. Frank had tears in his eyes when he talked about building that marina with his wife, how she had painted the sunset mural still hanging in the office, how his grandson learned to fish off those same docks. I told him I'd keep him on as manager with salary and benefits, so his family legacy wouldn't die. Frank's face broke into a genuine smile. Son, you'd be saving more than a business. You'd be saving my family's heart. The plan clicked together instantly. Buy the marina, save Frank's legacy, gain complete control over Nora's water access, and put an end to her harassment once and for all. She wanted to play power games. I was about to buy the whole damn battlefield. But I knew she wouldn't step aside quietly. Cornered people become reckless, and I had a feeling her next moves would test every ounce of legal armor Naomi could provide. I turned my ranch office into a full-blown war room, something that would have made a military strategist proud. Maps covered every wall, showing water flow routes, property lines, and jurisdiction boundaries. Naomi brought in a veteran water rights lawyer named Malcolm Tate, a 30-year expert who took one glance at my documents and let out a low whistle. Son, you're not just buying a marina, Malcolm said, spreading the survey maps across my dining table. You're buying a monopoly on water access for this entire region. In water law, the person with senior rights controls everything downstream. Frank became my secret weapon, offering 45 years of local insight and marina records that revealed just how dependent the surrounding community was on his business. Carlos Vega, the county inspector who had become an unexpected ally, quietly guided us on code enforcement options that could shut down any retaliatory moves Nora might attempt. The legal strategy was brilliantly straightforward. Malcolm explained it like this. My senior water rights gave me nuclear-level leverage, but I didn't want to be the neighbor who scorched the earth. Plan A was to offer the HOA a chance to purchase legal lake access at a fair market price. Plan B was cutting them off entirely and forcing them to drive 20 miles to the nearest public lake. Meanwhile, Naomi was assembling a harassment case at the same time. She had proof of false police reports, repeated trespassing, vandalism, and defamation. Nora had handed us enough ammunition to drag her through civil court for 5 years straight. The financial pieces fell into place like gears locking together. My bank approved a $1.2 million cash offer for the marina. No inspections, no contingencies, closing in 7 days. Frank negotiated to stay on as general manager for $65,000 a year with full benefits. The renovation budget of $300,000 would cover new docks, boat lifts, and an expanded tackle shop. Revenue projections looked excellent, around $180,000 a year from slip rentals, fuel sales, bait, and guide services. Frank's reputation was legendary among fishermen, and word spread fast that the marina was about to get revived. The community rallied behind us with surprising enthusiasm. Local contractors, sick of Nora complaining about their unsightly work trucks, offered labor at cost. Eddie Morales from the bait shop agreed to move his business to the marina, bringing his loyal customers with him. Even the sheriff's department quietly rooted for us. Deputy Ruiz mentioned they would increase patrols around the marina because they were tired of Nora's bogus emergency calls wasting county resources. Here's a knowledge nugget worth remembering. Forming an LLC can shield your personal assets from business-related lawsuits and create tax advantages when structured correctly. And when you buy distressed commercial property, cash offers without inspection requirements can save you 20–30% because desperate sellers prefer certainty over high offers. I founded Silver Creek Holdings LLC to own the marina and shield my personal finances. Malcolm filed preliminary injunctions against HOA trespassing, while Naomi prepared cease and desist letters for every resident who'd used my shoreline illegally. Then came the psychological warfare, the most entertaining part. We planned to let Nora discover the marina purchase through public records the day before her monthly HOA meeting. Frank would casually mention his new boss, someone very serious about property rights, and even more serious about keeping trespassers off his land. I expanded my security system to 12 cameras covering every water access point. Frank's old fishing buddies became unofficial lake patrols, eager to help after years of watching HOA members treat the marina like it was theirs. Carlos agreed to prioritize any legitimate violations committed by HOA members, while Naomi's paralegal monitored Nora's social media for anything defamatory we could use in court. On the final night before closing, I stood in my war room, surrounded by charts, legal documents, and strategy notes. It had been a long time since I felt the rush of a coordinated plan coming together so perfectly. Naomi called with one final warning. Alex, people don't react well when they lose control. Nora is about to lose everything she thinks she owns. Be prepared for anything. I was ready. The real question was Nora ready for me? Nora's discovery of the Marina sale played out like the best reality TV episode I'd ever witnessed. Rebecca Arnold, an HOA member who worked at the county clerk's office, spotted the property transfer paperwork and immediately called Nora in a panic. 20 minutes later, Nora's white Mercedes came tearing down the road toward the marina like she was racing to a 5-alarm emergency. I watched through the security cameras as she screeched into the gravel lot, leapt out, and began snapping pictures of the sold sign like she was documenting a crime scene. Frank, bless him, delivered his lines perfectly. When Nora stormed over demanding to know who bought the place, he simply shrugged and said, "New owner seems like a real polite guy. Very firm about property rights, though. Real particular about keeping trespassers off what's his." You could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as the realization hit that her entire neighborhood's water access was now in the hands of the man she'd been targeting for months. Even after she stormed off, the sharp trace of her perfume mixed with the even sharper smell of fear lingered in the air. That evening, Nora called an emergency HOA meeting. Her email subject line read, "Community emergency hostile takeover of our lake access." She spun the Marina purchase as an attack on innocent residents and pushed for immediate legal action to preserve property values. The meeting was a disaster. 3 board members resigned on the spot, saying they were done with the drama. 4 others demanded to know why the HOA had been collecting lake access fees for a property they didn't legally control. But Nora wasn't done escalating. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. The guy lasted 1 week before calling Naomi to report that Nora's behavior was becoming unstable and ethically questionable, and he refused to continue. Nora's social media rants grew wilder by the day. She posted edited photos, making my ranch look like a scrapyard. But the edits were so obvious that commenters started responding with laughing emojis. Then she falsely claimed I had threatened to contaminate the water if the HOA didn't comply. I had never said anything remotely close to that, and I was literally investing money into improving the water quality. Even some of her supporters started backing away. Meanwhile, I was calmly building a bulletproof case. Naomi's defamation suit was prepped at $2 million in damages. Malcolm gathered statements from 15 former employees praising my character and leadership. Carlos documented every single false complaint with clear rebuttals. Frank organized a grand reopening celebration at the marina, free fishing for kids, live music, and barbecue for families. While Nora was spreading paranoia, we were bringing the community together. Then the regional newspaper ran an investigative article about Nora's history of harassment. Turns out she had pulled the same tactics in 2 previous neighborhoods before her time in Ridgewater. The pattern was clear: pick a target, escalate nonstop, then play the victim when consequences hit. Her husband Grant reached his breaking point at the hardware store. He cornered me in the fishing aisle, face red like he'd been boiling in the sun, and started threatening me with a string of insults. The whole thing was captured on store cameras and witnessed by a dozen shoppers. I stayed calm, told him if he wanted to discuss anything, his wife could contact my attorney. He shoved me and started ranting until employees escorted him out. The video blew up locally, completely destroying Nora's narrative that I was the aggressor. Meanwhile, the environmental investigation was revealing years' worth of HOA members dumping lawn chemicals and motor oil into the watershed. Frank's water test showed massive improvement since I blocked trespassers. Nora's supporters were now facing potential environmental fines totaling around $50,000, and the state was considering charges. The marina reopened stronger than ever. Over 200 people attended the community day. Veterans, families, and local business owners all showed up. Commissioner Fowler publicly acknowledged my contributions to local economic development. 3 struggling nearby businesses approached me about partnerships. Kids learned to fish from Frank's repaired docks, while the smell of barbecue drifted across the water. Meanwhile, Nora's surveillance obsession had reached stalker levels. My cameras caught her sneaking around at night. Frank's grandson overheard her at the gas station plotting one final move that would supposedly expose me. Even the private investigator she hired warned Naomi about her declining mental state. The stage was set for the county commissioners' meeting. Nora planned to pack the room with supporters for one last attempt to destroy me publicly. I was ready. Naomi had prepared a presentation that would settle everything. But I also knew Nora wasn't done, and people who feel power slipping away tend to do the most reckless things. The county commissioners' meeting was packed so tightly it felt like standing inside a pressurized can. Local news crews lined the back wall, cameras perched on tripods, while the harsh fluorescent lights reflected off the long conference table like we had stepped into a courtroom drama. Nora arrived with a dozen supporters wearing matching Protect Our Lake shirts, looking like a militant fan club gearing up for a showdown. I walked in quietly with Naomi, Malcolm, Frank, and Carlos. No costumes, no theatrics, just folders full of evidence. Commissioner Fowler called the meeting to order as murmurs rippled through the room. The tension was thick enough to cut with a pocket knife. Nora jumped right into her speech with the enthusiasm of a televangelist. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here because outside money is destroying our way of life," she shouted, jabbing her finger in my direction like she was casting a curse. "This man is hoarding natural resources that belong to the community. He's intimidating families, endangering children, and using his wealth to escape consequences." Her supporters clapped loudly, but I noticed the audience wasn't fully buying it. Scattered boos and skeptical headshakes told me the tide was already shifting. She submitted her petition, 67 signatures, demanding county intervention. She accused me of monopolizing a public waterway, claimed I was weaponizing property law, and insisted I was crushing the dreams of hardworking families. When she finally finished, I stood up slowly and thanked the commissioners for the chance to present facts. "I'm going to let the evidence speak," I said, connecting my laptop to the projector without raising my voice. The first slide was my legitimate deed, showing water rights dating back to 1892. The room buzzed as people realized the lake wasn't public and never had been. Next came video footage showing years of trespassing by HOA members. Time-stamped, clear, undeniable. Then came the knockout punch, a compilation of Grant cutting my dock lines at night, caught cleanly on camera from multiple angles. The entire room shifted uncomfortably. A few gasped. "These are recordings of Miss Halstead filing false police reports," I continued. Audio played of Nora claiming my boat had nearly hit children, on a morning the lake had been completely empty. Then I showed bank statements proving the HOA had collected $47,000 in illegal lake access fees for property they didn't own. Environmental reports followed, showing the water had actually gotten cleaner since I stopped the trespassing. Oh, that was when Nora lost it. Before the next slide even appeared, she shot out of her chair, shouting, "Those videos are fabricated. This is all doctored. He's bribing the county and buying lies." Commissioner Fowler slammed his gavel. "Miss Halstead, sit down. You're disrupting an official meeting." But Nora spiraled further, screaming about corruption and conspiracies, claiming I had officials in my pocket. Her supporters looked mortified as she accused half the room of being part of some shadowy plot. Deputy Ruiz approached with the restraining order, but Nora wasn't finished. She pointed at Frank and yelled, "He's part of it too. They're all working together to steal our lake." That's when I quietly pulled out my final exhibit, a $50,000 check made out to the County Environmental Fund. "Commissioners," I said, "this covers all restoration costs from illegal chemical dumping and creates a scholarship fund for local students studying conservation. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to protect what's mine and help this community thrive." The room erupted into applause. Frank stepped forward with tears in his eyes, thanking me for preserving his family's 45-year legacy. A representative from the veterans group spoke about our fundraising efforts. Even residents who once supported Nora started clapping. The commissioners voted unanimously to uphold my property rights and issued a resolution praising my investment in the community. The county attorney warned against future frivolous complaints, saying abuse of the system would result in sanctions. Meanwhile, Deputy Ruiz escorted Nora out of the building as she tried to hurl more accusations. In the parking lot, Nora attempted to rally supporters, but only 3 stayed to hear her rant at empty seats. A photographer snapped pictures of her, shouting at abandoned folding chairs, the perfect symbol of her collapsing influence. As people congratulated me outside the meeting, Frank's grandson tugged on my shirt. "Mr. Alex, thank you for saving our Marina. Grandpa says you're a hero. Sometimes victory isn't about revenge. It's about standing up and doing what's right, even when the other side wants to crush you." But the story wasn't over yet, and something told me Nora still had one final surprise ready to detonate. 6 months later, the transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Lakeshore Marina was thriving, running at 85% slip capacity with a waiting list on weekends. Frank's grandson, Mateo, had started learning business operations from his grandfather, ensuring the family story wouldn't end anytime soon. The scholarship fund we launched had already awarded $25,000 to local students heading into trade programs or environmental studies, with applications coming in from all over the county. Our fishing tournaments had become regular monthly events, raising money for veterans, kids with disabilities, and conservation efforts. What began as my personal battle had grown into something that stitched the entire community together. 11 former HOA members publicly apologized, and several became regulars at the marina, bringing their families out for quiet afternoons on the water. The new HOA board, elected after Nora's resignation, focused on actual neighborhood issues instead of harassment campaigns. Property values in the area even rose thanks to the marina's improvements and the flood of positive publicity. Local shops enjoyed a boost from new visitors drawn to the revitalized lakeside area. Eddie Morales expanded his bait store, hired 2 employees, and thanked me every time he saw me. It was incredible to watch how standing up to a bully had rippled outward to help so many people. As for Nora Halstead, well, karma tends to keep immaculate records. She stepped down as HOA president after losing a recall vote by a staggering 23-4 margin. The civil lawsuit for defamation, vandalism, and false reports drained nearly $30,000 from her family in legal fees and settlement agreements. Grant pled guilty to criminal mischief and was sentenced to 200 hours of community service, most of it cleaning up the same waterways he'd helped pollute. Their home quietly went up for sale, and the rumor around town was that they were moving to a different county where nobody recognized them. Sometimes justice is nothing more than letting people face the consequences of their own actions. The marina passed profitability in just 4 months, beating every projection we had. Frank was promoted to general manager with a salary that finally gave his family the stability they deserved. We planned an expansion for the following year, a boat manufacturing demo site and an educational hub for local schools. But the real victory wasn't financial. I'd found something I never had in Silicon Valley, a sense of belonging, purpose, and community. In dating Naomi Park, that was the unexpected gift in all of this. Our relationship, built on shared values of fairness and integrity, felt more real than anything I'd known during my years in tech. The environmental improvements exceeded even our hopes. Creek water reached quality levels not seen in 2 decades after we stopped the illegal dumping. Wildlife cameras captured deer, wild turkeys, and migratory birds returning. The University of Texas Environmental Science program began using our marina as a research site, sending students to study the recovering ecosystem. Neighboring ranchers adopted the same conservation methods I used, turning the region into a model for rural sustainability statewide. Sometimes doing the right thing sets off a chain reaction you never could have predicted. People from across Texas who had suffered HOA abuse reached out asking for legal guidance after seeing our story in the news. A documentary crew filmed the entire saga for a series on David versus Goliath legal battles. The Texas Attorney General's office launched an investigation into recurring HOA abuses after receiving dozens of complaints. The story went viral, shared more than 250,000 times online. Folks were hungry for a story where justice really did prevail. But the sweetest moment came just last week. I was standing on the same dock where this entire ordeal started, enjoying the sunrise with a fishing rod in hand, when Mateo ran up holding a bass nearly as long as his arm. "Mr. Alex, look, Grandpa says it's the biggest one he's ever seen from here." As I helped him measure it, I thought of my parents, who taught me to stand firm, be fair, and look out for those around you. They would have been proud to see where those lessons led. I looked across the lake. families laughing, kids learning how to fish, neighbors helping one another, and realize something. True wealth isn't your bank account. It's the impact you leave behind. My phone buzzed with a call from a rancher in Oklahoma facing the same kind of HOA harassment. Naomi mentioned a growing pattern of out-of-state developers using identical tactics to pressure rural landowners. Looks like I might be becoming the go-to guy for taking down abusive HOAs across the region. But that's a story for another time. If you've got your own HOA nightmare, share it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story got your heart racing like it did mine, hit that subscribe button. More David versus Goliath battles are on the way. Remember, they can try to control your land, but they can't control your principles. And sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's rising above and lifting everyone around you while you do it.